Welcome to video number 2. We are on concept number 11, but as I go through it, 11, 12, and 14 all have to do with this. And notice I've added a little bit more. They're going to ask what are the solutions or what are the zeros or whatever it is. Just take the answers and plug them in and see if it equals what it says it's supposed to equal. Now, I will say an answer that says like 3 plus or minus square root 3 or something like that. That just means try it with 3 plus square root 3 and try it with 3 minus square root 3. Both of those should equal 0. But honestly, once you find the first one, the second one should do it as well. There's a question. This is concept 13, the one that kind of got skipped. It kind of wants to know what you do first. What's the logical thing to do first? Well, really you look and see if you can factor one side of like this right here. If I can factor this side, then that's the logical first step. The other logical first step is to get this equal to 0, so subtract. So basically, if the first side can be factored, then that's your first step. Otherwise, you'll want to subtract or add whatever's on this side of this equal sign to the other side so you can get it equal to 0. What needs to be added to complete the square? Well, completing the squares, it's like a 5-step process, but it's pretty simple. You take whatever's here in front of x, take that number, positive or negative, doesn't matter, divide it by 2, and then square that number. And sometimes it's a fraction because obviously not every number divides by 2. Square it, and that is the number that is needed to be added to both sides to complete the square. Result after completing the square. That b over 2 squared we talked about, well, we know it needs to be added over here. One step that kind of got skipped is this value here needs to be subtracted over here. So take whatever number's here, subtract or add whatever's opposite here, and then add b over 2 squared. The b over 2 is just going to go here and simplify it. If it simplifies, so if it's like 8 over 2, then it's going to be a 4. If it's 7 over 2, it's going to leave as 7 over 2. This sign here should match this sign here. So if this is subtract, then this had to have been subtract. Quadratic formula. Obviously, this covers a lot, and I think it covers even more than this. But here's your quadratic formula, something that you would use to find zeros or solutions. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the question that wants to know, here's this formula, what is it? What's the quadratic formula? Or which one of these is the quadratic formula? Just match it up exactly. They'll do little things to kind of throw you off. This I we'll talk about here in a moment. If it asks, hey, what goes underneath here? Well, that's just b squared minus 4ac. This is called the discriminant. We'll talk a little bit more about this. In order to use quadratic formula, there's 3 things that are kind of musts. You cannot have a 0 right here because 0x squared means you don't have an x squared, which means this would be 0, and 2 times 0 is 0, and you can't divide by 0. So that a value in front of the x, that coefficient in front of the x, cannot be 0. This cannot be x to the 3rd, or x to the 4th, or x to the 5th, or whatever it is, because that's just not how the square root here is what counteracts the square. And this has to equal 0. It has to equal 0. So those are the 3 things. Now, if you're plugging stuff into your calculator, because you take A and put it there and there, take B, put it there and there, and C and there and there. And again, you know how to deal with plus or minus. You do it once with plus and once with minus. If you get an error, It's usually because you have an imaginary solution that we'll talk about. And that would just place a little bitty I, like right about there, right in front of your square root sign, which also, this can kind of be broken up into two. So a lot of answers will break these up, and maybe this fraction will reduce, but this one won't. So let's kind of be on the lookout for that. The easiest thing is to find your discriminant. Square root of, it could be 53 or whatever. That'll start giving you a heads up as to is other stuff going to kind of get canceled out. Because your discriminant, concept number 24, tells you a bunch about what type of solutions you're looking for. If it's positive, you're going to have two real solutions. If it's negative, you're going to have two imaginary solutions, so no real solutions. And if it's zero, you have one real solution. We'll stop this video here. I know we covered like 6 concepts in one right here. There's a bunch of videos on quadratic formula and how to use it and how to plug it in. And it might make life a little bit easier if you do a little bit of Google searching or whatever. But yeah, this video is not too terribly bad. But we got about a little more than halfway, I think, through our concepts.